Well, hello. Good to see you today. This video is being pre-recorded. Today is Friday, December the 18th, and we are doing this video in lieu of our regularly scheduled Sunday morning worship period. Obviously, you're tuning in and watching this because you know that our services today were canceled because we had several who were exposed or at least potentially exposed to the COVID virus. So while this is not nearly as engaging or uplifting as gathering together with God's people on the Lord's Day for worship, I hope that this study will be helpful to you. We're going to be studying today from the Gospels, particularly from Mark, the 5th chapter. And we'll be looking at some of the miracles of Jesus that he performed. And we can read about these miracles in Mark 5, in Matthew chapter 9, as well as in Luke chapter 8. But we'll be looking primarily at Mark chapter 5 today. So I encourage you to get out your Bible, read along with me as we study together. Did you ever imagine that you would take for granted something as simple as a handshake? Something as simple as giving someone else a hug? You know, all of our lives, or at least all of my life, I had taken those things for granted, that handshakes were just the accepted way to greet people. I never even gave any thought about shaking hands with somebody else and whether or not that could pose a potential health concern for me. Same thing with hugs. Hugs is something that you give. You extend it to someone else. You receive a hug from someone else. And not until this virus has come along this year had I even given any consideration to whether or not there was a potential health risk with something like a simple handshake or a hug to somebody else. And so that which was always assumed to be normal, acceptable, and okay, the handshake, the hug given to someone else, it's been discouraged due to these health concerns. Human touch, human interaction has been discouraged all year long, at least in some measure. And all of us understand what I'm talking about. But human touch is important. And I think I realize that now more than ever before. And I suspect you probably do as well. That handshake is a lot more meaningful to me now than it ever was before. That hug, especially the hugs, is a lot more meaningful than it ever has been before. Those were things that for years I just accepted as normal and polite, and they pose no risk whatsoever. But that's changed now. And we have health experts, we have doctors, we have people who are in various levels of government who are suggesting human interaction needs to be limited, that we don't need to be shaking hands and hugging people and interacting with strangers in ways that we once did. And I'm not here to discuss the merits of that one way or the other. I see value in some of those measures. Some of them I think may be a little bit more, maybe not as useful, but that's neither here nor there. The fact is, regardless of what I or you or anybody thinks about it, these cautions are being advised and being given, and in at least some measure, it's certainly understandable. COVID-19 has limited our human interaction to a smaller circle, hasn't it? As I said, we're not shaking hands with people as much anymore. And the only hugs that maybe we're extending, and I know I'm speaking at least personally here, but probably for you as well, the only hugs that I'm extending right now are to people in my immediate circle of family. And I think it is important for us to see that while we implement and utilize measures of caution and distancing, or whatever we may want to call it, and while that is certainly an advisable thing and a wise thing to do, human touch, human interaction is still very important. And I don't think I appreciated that as much before as I do now. I hope that we can still have an awareness and maybe a new awareness that human touch is not something we want to go a long time without. We don't interact with strangers the way that we used to. Used to be, at least with me, and I suspect I'm speaking for you as well, that I might meet a stranger in a grocery store or maybe somewhere else, and we would begin striking up a conversation with each other, and it would end with a handshake and a "have a nice day." We don't really do that anymore, do we? Here in our church elders have asked us to limit the handshakes and the hugs. Again, that's understandable. And it may be that we don't like it, but we need to honor that request. And I think we can all see and appreciate that there is some wisdom to that, especially as more and more people are exposed to this virus. None of us like it. Our elders don't like it either, I promise you that. But it's an understandable measure that's being taken. But we even now look at people, not just strangers, even loved ones, even people who are friends, people whom we know very well. We may even find ourselves looking at them with some degree of distrust or suspicion because we wonder, well, how careful have they been? Have they been as cautious about these health concerns as I have? Should I interact with them? Because I don't know the answer to that question. I'm really looking forward to the time when handshakes and hugs will be normal again. When handshakes and hugs are not something to be dispensed with great caution and concern. I want it to go back to the way that it was before, when I can come into the church building and I can shake hands with anybody that I want to, and I can hug anybody that I want to without having any concerns for health reasons. But for now, that's not where we are, and we got to do the best we can. But in Mark chapter 5, and as I mentioned before, also Matthew chapter 9, Luke chapter 8, Jesus displays the importance of human touch and human close, intimate interaction in some of the miracles that he performed. Let me just tell you where we've been chronologically here as we come to Mark chapter 5. In Mark chapter 4, at the end of the chapter, Jesus calmed the sea. You remember that story when the winds were blowing and the waves were crashing. Jesus stood up and he said, "Peace, be still." And the sea and the storm came to a calm. And so Jesus displays his power over nature. How does anyone have the ability to control the forces of nature? Who can do that but God? And that's Mark's point. That's exactly who Jesus is. Look at what he's able to do. Then as we come into Mark chapter 5, we have the story of the Geracin demoniac. You remember that amazing story? There was this man who was out in the tombs, and he was bound in shackles and chains, and he was naked, and he was just tormenting himself, and he was unable to be controlled because of all of these demons who had possessed him, all of these unclean spirits who were within him. And Jesus comes and he casts out those demons, that legion of demons, as they said their name was to be called. He cast them into the herd of swine, and they went rushing off of the hillside. Jesus' power is not only that over nature and the physical things which can be seen, like the wind and the storms, the consequences of the wind can be seen. The trees blowing and the wind or the waves crashing. The storm, the wind is driving that. You can see those physical things with your eyes, but these unclean spirits, Jesus even has power over them. He has power over these spiritual elements and these spiritual beings as well. Then as we continue in Mark chapter 5, In verse 21, when Jesus had again crossed over by the boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders, named Jairus, came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." Jairus comes and he says, "My daughter is at the point of death. I need you to come to my house where she is. Put your hands on her, touch her so that she can be healed and live." And Jairus' request is accepted by Jesus. Jesus goes with him and begins to travel with him toward his house. But did you notice in verse 24, it says that Jesus went with him, but the verse continues and says, "And a large crowd was following him and pressing in on him." You see, Jairus is not the only one who wanted Jesus' attention. There's a large group of people who have gathered around Jesus, and they're pressing in on him. Everybody wants to get closer. Everybody wants to get a better look at Jesus. Jesus is trying to find his way through this crowd with Jairus to go to his house to heal his daughter. But interjected into this story of Jesus and the daughter of Jairus, there's another miracle story that's going to happen here. Verse 25, a woman was there. So in this large crowd that's pressing in on Jesus, a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. This woman has this issue of blood that we don't know exactly what it was, but most scholars and commentators believe, and I think this is probably so, that this was related to her regular menstrual cycle. And this poor woman had dealt with this issue for 12 years. Now, the Bible that I'm reading from at this moment is kind of a compilation Bible. It takes the parallel gospel passages and groups them together. And so what I'm reading from might read slightly different from what you're reading from. But I'm reading from this for a reason, because some of these other details that Matthew gives or Luke gives or Mark gives, they're all right here, and it's good to see them all together. The text says that she was subject to this bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all that she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. And when she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and she touched his cloak, because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. And immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. If I can just touch his clothes, that will be enough to heal me. And at once, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" The disciples answered, "You see the people crowding around you. How can you ask, 'Who touched me?' Everybody is touching you. Everybody is trying to get close to you, pressing in on you. What do you mean, who touched you? There's probably dozens and dozens of people who have touched you as we have made our way through this crowd." But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." I want you to notice these elements of these two stories. Jairus came to Jesus and fell at his feet and begged him to come and lay his hands, to touch his daughter. This woman comes and she falls down at his feet and she explains what happened, what she did. If I can just touch his clothes, I will be healed. Obviously, we're dealing with a power here that no one is able to imitate. Only Jesus has this kind of authority and power. But this woman's faith was strong enough that she recognized, I don't even have to touch him. If I can just touch his clothes, if I can just touch his garments, that's good enough to heal me. This woman was freed from this issue that the doctors couldn't fix, that her money couldn't buy. But Jesus' power was able to do it because she came and she touched. A little bit different than what Jairus is requesting. Jairus wants Jesus to come and have Jesus do the touching of his daughter, laying his hands on his daughter. The woman here is touching Jesus. But again, that element of touch and interaction present in both stories. And so while Mark gives us this interruption in the story of Jairus with this woman, once that has been dealt with, once that miracle has been performed, now the shift in focus goes back to Jairus and his daughter. Mark 5, verse 35. While Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. Your daughter is dead, they said. Why bother the teacher anymore? Overhearing what they said, Jesus told him, don't be afraid. Just believe. I want you to think about the conflicting message that Jairus has just gotten here. Some have come from his house and have said, she's died. Stop what you're doing. Don't bother Jesus anymore. She's died. Don't trouble him anymore. In other words, give up. But Jesus gives a conflicting message. Don't give up. Don't be afraid. Just believe. Keep the faith, Jairus, that you just had moments before when you came and asked for my help. You did that because you believed that I could help. So don't let this news of your daughter's death discourage you. Only believe. So the story continues, and Jesus comes to Jairus' house. He goes into the house, and he says, the child is not dead, but asleep. But everyone laughed at him, the text says. Now, surely Jesus knows the difference between a sleeping person and a dead person. A sleeping person who's still alive and a dead person who isn't. Of course, he knows the difference. Sometimes the Bible uses the term sleeping to talk about death. But Jesus is saying here, I think, you've got to have faith. It's as if this girl is just sleeping. As if she is in a simple slumber, but I can wake her up from this. I will wake her up from this. Obviously, Jesus knows the difference. But I want you to notice what the text says that he did. After he put them all out of the room, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him, and he went in where the child was. He took her by the hand. You remember what Jairus asked him to do? Come and lay your hands on her. Come and touch her, and she will be healed. And Jesus does that. He takes her by the hand, and he said to her, Talitha cumi, which means, little girl, get up. And immediately the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. At this, they were completely astonished. And he gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this and told them to give her something to eat. He took her by the hand, he touched her, and raised her up. Now, after this story, there's another miracle that immediately follows this chronologically. However, it's not in Mark chapter 5. So now we need to turn over to Matthew chapter 9. And in Matthew chapter 9, we have a story of some blind men who are healed. Matthew chapter 9 and verse 27 beginning says, "As Jesus went on from there, two blind men followed him, calling out, 'Have mercy on us, Son of David.' When he had gone indoors, the blind men came to him, and he asked them, 'Do you believe that I am able to do this?' 'Yes, Lord,' they replied. Then he touched their eyes and said, 'According to your faith, let it be done to you.' And their sight was restored. Jesus warned them sternly, 'See that no one knows about this,' but they went out and spread the news about him all over the region." He touched their eyes. And so here we have three stories. One story which has two parts, but three different miraculous stories back to back to back that all contain this element of Jesus' touch. Jairus says, "Come lay your hands on my daughter." The woman with the flow of blood says, "If I can just touch him, if I can just touch his clothes even, I'll be healed." Jesus lays his hand on Jairus' daughter. He takes her by the hand, and here with the blind men, he touches their face. Now, I'm not suggesting to you in these stories and looking at these miracles that it was solely the element of touch that made these miracles possible. I'm not saying that at all. Jesus could have healed all of these people simply by speaking the word. And there were some miraculous instances where he did that. But I just point out here in these miracles that he did touch these people, or that this woman, in her case, touched him. This element of connection, this human interaction and touch was present. I think Jesus saw value in this touch and in this interaction. There's something special about touching others, isn't there? You know, when a young couple is dating and they stroll down the sidewalk together, they may be holding hands. That means something to them, right? Or when a married couple engages in a romantic embrace, that means something. And when that newborn baby is held by its mother, it's not just the physical contact of skin and skin. There's a bonding there that takes place, right? In all of those cases. And when we shake someone's hand, it's more than just two hands coming together. It's the greeting, it's the association, it's the relationship that is either beginning or is being reconfirmed. When we hug someone, it's not just two bodies that are being entwined by wrapping their arms around each other. It's much more than that, isn't it? It's what the hug means. It's what the activity involves. Human touch, human interaction is so valuable. It's so special. And I'm afraid maybe we've lost some of that this year because we've been told that we have to limit it. And again, I understand it. I know why. I get it. I just don't want us to lose sight of how important it is to have close, intimate relationships. None of us were created or designed to make it through this world without anybody else in our circle or in our corner. We need support. We need loved ones. We need help. We need people who are there for us and for whom we can be there for. In every one of these stories, Jesus' touch is obviously powerful. It's miraculous. He's healing. There's power in his touch. And there's power in his touch because he's divine, because he's God. And he has that power, unparalleled power. But in every touch, there's also compassion. And that compassion comes from both his divinity and his humanity. Humanity doesn't have the power that Jesus has. But humanity does understand compassion. We can feel that compassion. Jesus felt compassion because he was human, but also in an even deeper sense because he's divine. God understands compassion. He is constantly referred to in the scripture as being compassionate and merciful and full of loving kindness. God understands compassion. Jesus understood compassion, and his touch, his close interaction with those who needed him, those interactions displayed his power and his compassion. So here's what I want us to learn from these stories. Our touch is obviously not powerful in any sense, like Jesus' touch was powerful. But our touch can be compassionate. We can take someone by the hand when they're grieving. We can hug someone when they're mourning. And that touch, that interaction, it displays compassion. It displays sympathy or empathy, even in some cases. Now, don't hear me saying that, Ben is saying we all should go out and start handshaking and hugging everybody, strangers, and being careless and reckless. And, we've been told that we should be cautious, and Ben's suggesting otherwise. That's not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, I don't want us to lose sight of the value of human touch. I don't want us to forget about how meaningful it is to reach out and touch someone, to extend a hand to someone and help them, or extend a hand simply to shake and greet them, to extend a hug to somebody and be there for them in their time of need. Human touch is powerful, not in the miraculous sense in our lives, but it's powerful in the sense of the gesture and what it means to each other, what it means to all of us as we engage in these kinds of greetings or hugs or whatever it may be. We've lost so much human interaction this year. And I don't just mean by the limiting of our assemblies for worship. Staring at someone, talking to someone through a Zoom call or through a FaceTime video, hey, it's nice, it's good, it's better than nothing. But it's not the real thing, is it? And we all know that. And I am really looking forward to the time when we can all just shake hands, hug each other without any health concerns or health considerations, when we can go back to doing those things again, because isolation and separation is not good for anybody. And I hope that we can make it through this time in a very short time and get back to where we can engage one another as we once did. Our touch is not powerful in the way that Jesus' touch was, but we can still use our hands to show compassion like Jesus did. We can use our hands to show loving service to others as Jesus did. So let's not forget about the value of touch, the value of reaching out and extending a hand or extending a hug and showing someone that we care. Thanks for studying with me today. God bless you.